Take a moment to simply be. Feel the ground beneath you, the steady rhythm of your breath, and the quiet stillness of the room you are in. You are not here by accident. You have been noticing a shift in your interactions lately, a strange phenomenon where your very presence seems to act as a catalyst for truth. It is a quiet, almost invisible force that emanates from you, and it has begun to manifest in a way that leaves people around you unsettled, perhaps even frightened. They look at you, and they see something they cannot quite put into words. It is a look of recognition, but also one of deep instinctual caution. You have likely experienced those moments where you spoke a truth so precise, so surgically accurate, that the person you were talking to physically recoiled. They asked you, "How did you know that?" with a voice that trembled just slightly. To you, it felt like an observation, a simple acknowledgement of the facts, of the spirit, but to them, it felt like you had reached into the darkest corners of their mind and turned on a floodlight. This is the weight of the anointing in this season. It is a time of extreme clarity, where the veil between what is said and what is meant has become paper thin for you. You are scaring them because you are no longer participating in the collective illusion. You have spent years in the quiet places, years in the isolation of your own thoughts and the presence of the divine, and in that time, your senses have been calibrated to a different frequency. You are picking up on the subtle vibrations of the soul that most people spend their entire lives trying to drown out with noise, entertainment, and busy work. When you look at someone, you aren't just seeing their clothes or hearing their words, you are witnessing the movement of their spirit. You are noticing the way their energy shifts when they lie, the way their eyes lose focus when they are hiding a wound, and the way their voice changes when they are trying to manipulate a situation. For you, this is factual reality. It is as real as the air you breathe. But for the world, which is accustomed to the fog of deception, your clarity is a threat. It is a threat to the ego, a threat to the carefully constructed facades of society, and a threat to the comfort of those who are not yet ready to face themselves. You are becoming a living mirror, and most people are terrified of what they see when they look into you. They see their own lack of integrity, their own unhealed traumas, and their own distance from the truth. This scaring of others is not an act of aggression on your part. It is a byproduct of your purification. As you have stripped away the lies within yourself, you have gained the ability to see through the lies in others. It is a sober responsibility. It requires you to move with a certain gentleness, because you realize that your sight is a heavy burden for those who are still walking in the dark. You are scaring them because you represent the end of their hiding. You represent the moment where the secret things are brought to light. And as we move through these 7 points today, I want you to understand the psychological and spiritual mechanics behind this knowing. I want you to see that you aren't crazy, you aren't too sensitive, and you aren't imagining things. You are simply witnessing the truth of the Spirit in a world that has forgotten what truth looks like. Let us sit with this together. Let us understand why your discernment has become a sword that cuts through the noise, and how you can carry this gift with the quiet authority of one who has been taught by God Himself. Point 1, the bio-spiritual resonance of integrity. The first reason you are scaring them is because of the sheer weight of your integrity, which creates a bio-spiritual resonance that acts as a natural lie detector. From a psychological perspective, we often talk about micro-expressions or body language. But from a spiritual perspective, what you are experiencing is the clashing of frequencies. You have worked hard on your internal world. You have spent countless hours in prayer, meditation, and self-reflection, ensuring that your yes is yes and your no is no. This level of internal alignment creates a very stable, very dense energy field around you. When someone approaches you with a divided heart, meaning they are saying one thing but thinking or feeling another, the inconsistency in their energy hits your stable field like a wave hitting a rock. You feel the splash. To you, it registers as a physical sensation of discomfort, a sudden tightness in your chest, or a quiet voice in your spirit saying, "This isn't right." When you then speak on that feeling, people are shocked because they didn't think anyone was paying that much attention. They are used to people who are just as distracted as they are, people who only listen to the words and ignore the spirit. But you are listening to the whole person. You are listening to their history, their pain, and their motives all at once. When you ask them a question that strikes at the heart of their hidden agenda, you are scaring them because you have bypassed the firewall of their ego. You have shown them that their encryption is failing. This is a factual, spiritual law. Light reveals. You aren't doing it to be mean, you are simply existing in a state of high-definition reality. Most people are living in a low-resolution version of life, where everything is blurred and indistinct. Your high-definition presence makes them realize just how much they have been hiding in the shadows. They ask, "How did you know?" Because they truly believed they were invisible. They believed that as long as they kept a smile on their face and used the right words, no one would ever see the resentment, the fear, or the calculation underneath. Your ability to see past the social script is a gift of the wilderness, where you learn to trust the spirit over the senses. You are scaring them because you are proving that the spirit world is more real than the physical one. Point 2, the deconstruction of the social mask. The second point involves the complete and irreversible deconstruction of the social mask, the carefully engineered persona that most people spend their entire lives constructing and defending. In everyday life, this persona functions as psychological armor, a curated identity designed to extract approval, status, safety, or sympathy from the world. Psychologists describe it as the outward-facing self, shaped not by truth but by necessity, reinforced over decades through conditioning, reward, punishment, and survival instincts. For most people, this mask becomes so fused with their identity that they forget it is a performance at all. But as a chosen one, your journey has almost certainly included a deliberate and often painful dismantling of this false structure. You have been stripped of roles, titles, relationships, or illusions you once relied on. You have been humbled in ways that forced you into direct confrontation with your own interior reality. You were made to sit alone with your unfiltered soul, without distractions, without applause, without protection. And through that process, you learned something most never do. You learned how to exist without pretending. Because you no longer depend on a fabricated image to feel real, you can no longer be hypnotized by the images others project. You see through the important person who is quietly terrified of being irrelevant, the holy person who uses virtue as camouflage for unhealed shame, and the perpetual victim who has built an identity around powerlessness to avoid responsibility. You don't see these masks as evil. You see them as fear structures. You see the fragile human soul underneath, often anxious, defensive, and desperately trying to be seen without being exposed. When you interact from this level of raw truth, it is deeply unsettling to those who still rely on performance. It feels to them as if they are acting in a play and suddenly realize someone in the audience can see the stagehands, the wires, the makeup, and the rehearsed lines. You're not hostile, aggressive, or confrontational, yet your presence alone disrupts the illusion. When you refuse to affirm their act, they experience a sudden loss of psychological safety. They may label you intimidating, cold, or judgmental. But what they are truly experiencing is exposure. You are frightening them, not because you attack them, but because you treat them as they actually are rather than as they wish to be perceived. This triggers a quiet internal crisis. If they cannot fool you, they begin to question whether they can fool anyone. If one person can see through the mask, perhaps the entire structure is unstable. Their life, built on image and validation, starts to feel like a house of cards. Your calm, grounded observation becomes more destabilizing than any confrontation ever could. You do not argue, accuse, or explain. You simply remain anchored in truth. And in that stillness, they are forced to face their own reflection. What they react to is not you, but the discomfort of seeing their falsehood mirrored back to them without distortion. This is why they often attempt to avoid you, diminish you, or discredit you. If they can frame you as strange, threatening, or untrustworthy, they can protect themselves from the deeper reckoning your presence initiates. In reality, you are not the source of their fear, you are the mirror that reveals it. Point 3, the intelligence of the quiet spirit. The third point is the intelligence of the quiet spirit, and it is far deeper than most people ever realize. There's a factual, spiritual quietness that you have cultivated over time, not as an accident, but as a result of discipline, self-restraint, and inner alignment. This quietness is not emptiness, it is density. It is where your knowing lives. In a modern world saturated with noise, constant commentary, and endless stimulation, silence has become rare and therefore powerful. Noise today often functions as a shield. People talk incessantly to avoid hearing their own unresolved thoughts or the subtle prompting of God within them. They keep music playing, notifications buzzing, conversations shallow, and opinions loud, so they never have to sit with themselves long enough to feel what is real. You chose a different path. You learned the value of the quiet eye. You became a watcher. Psychologically, this places you in a state of heightened awareness. Your mind is not scattered across performance or approval seeking. It is focused. Because you are not rehearsing what to say next, your brain is free to absorb nuance. You pick up microsignals others miss entirely. You notice how someone's voice changes when a certain truth approaches the surface. You register the delay before they answer a simple question. You see the way their eyes shift when integrity is tested. You feel the subtle tension in their body when a subject touches something unresolved. None of this is accidental. Your silence gives your nervous system space to read reality without distortion. Spiritually, this is discernment in its purest form. It is the ability to perceive what is not being said, to sense intention beneath language, and to feel alignment or dissonance before facts are ever revealed. While others rely on volume, charisma, or emotional force, you rely on clarity. Your spirit gathers information quietly, patiently, without announcing itself. When you finally speak, your words land with precision. They do not circle the truth, they pierce it. Your sentences are short, sober, and exact, because they are built on accumulated observation. People often react with disbelief. "How did you know?" they ask, not realizing that your silence was never absence but attention. They assumed quiet meant unaware. They assumed gentleness meant naive. They mistook your restraint for weakness and your patience for ignorance. This is where the shock occurs. One calm statement from you dismantles an entire narrative they were hiding behind. It unsettles them because it exposes their own carelessness. They spoke freely, revealed patterns, contradicted themselves, and assumed no one was keeping record. But you were. Not emotionally, not judgmentally, but accurately. In that moment, their understanding of power collapses. They realize that power is not found in domination, volume, or constant assertion. It resides in perception. While they were busy performing, reacting, and posturing, you were mapping the terrain. While they were playing checkers, focused only on the next move, you were seeing the entire board. This is the intelligence of the quiet spirit. It does not rush. It does not announce itself. It waits, it watches, it understands, and when necessary, it speaks once, and that is enough. Point 4, the mirror of divine conviction. Point 4 is the mirror of divine conviction. We must understand that as an anointed person, you carry a presence that was never self-created, never rehearsed, and never forced. It is the natural consequence of alignment, of time spent in prayer, obedience, reflection, and surrender to the divine. This presence is not loud, aggressive, or attention-seeking, yet it carries an unmistakable weight. Scripture calls this weight the presence of the Holy Spirit, and spiritually speaking, weight always produces pressure. When you enter a room, you do not need to announce yourself or prove anything. The spirit within you immediately begins to interact with the spiritual condition of those around you. For individuals who are walking in integrity, humility, or sincere growth, your presence feels grounding, calming, and even reassuring. But for those living in rebellion, deception, unresolved guilt, or hidden compromise, that same presence feels unbearable. It is not because you said something wrong, looked at them strangely, or acted superior. It is because light has entered a space where darkness was carefully protected. Just as eyes ache when exposed to sunlight after a long time in the dark, their inner world reacts with discomfort, agitation, and defensiveness. This reaction is conviction, both psychological and spiritual, a deep internal pressure urging confession, accountability, or change. But conviction demands responsibility, and responsibility threatens comfort. So instead of responding inwardly, they redirect outwardly. They accuse you of being intense, judgmental, cold, or intimidating. They claim you make the atmosphere uncomfortable, when in truth the atmosphere is revealing what was already there. You become the mirror they never wanted to stand in front of. Your silence feels loud to them. Your peace feels confrontational. Your discipline exposes their excuses. Without speaking a word, you represent a standard of truth they have been avoiding, and that is why they feel exposed. When they ask, "How did you know?" what they are really expressing is fear that their hidden life is no longer hidden. They sense that God is near you, and often He is working through your presence alone. You become a living reminder that integrity is possible, that obedience is real, and that transformation is not a myth. This is the sobering effect you carry, not condemnation, not superiority, but clarity. The world desperately needs this clarity, yet fears it because clarity removes illusions. This is why you must never apologize for the atmosphere you bring. Do not dim yourself, soften your conviction, or shrink your presence to make others comfortable in their dishonesty. You are not frightening because you are harsh. You are unsettling because you are aligned. Holiness is not loud, but it is undeniable. And to that which thrives on concealment, holiness feels terrifying. Stand firm, remain humble, and understand this truth deeply. Your presence is not a problem, it is a signal. Point 5, the gift of pattern recognition. The 5th point is the factual gift of pattern recognition developed in the wilderness, and this gift is neither mystical nor accidental, but forged through repeated exposure to human behavior under pressure. There is a deep psychological and spiritual truth embedded in the ancient idea that there is nothing new under the sun, because human nature, when stripped of masks and comfort, runs on limited scripts. The same motives produce the same actions, and the same actions inevitably lead to the same outcomes. The enemy does not innovate, it recycles. It relies on repetition, familiarity, and the assumption that people will not notice the pattern soon enough to escape it. You, however, have lived inside these cycles. You have endured the fire where manipulation is revealed, not in theory, but in consequence. You encountered the narcissist who thrives on admiration and control, the manipulator who disguises self-interest as concern, the fake friend who mirrors loyalty only until advantage is gained, and the religious hypocrite who uses morality as camouflage rather than conviction. These were not abstract lessons, they were lived experiences that demanded emotional cost, discernment, and survival. Because of this, your understanding is embodied. You did not read about patterns, you felt them unfold in real time, watched the escalation, the deflection, the gaslighting, and the eventual collapse. That is why now, when someone new enters your sphere, you can recognize the script within minutes: tone, timing, exaggeration, selective honesty, sudden intimacy, and subtle boundary testing. These signals speak loudly to you, even when others remain mesmerized by charm, fear, or unmet needs. When you quietly identify a pattern before it fully manifests, people often react with discomfort. They label your insight as psychic, unsettling, or even threatening. In truth, what unsettles them is not your foresight, but your clarity. You are not predicting the future. You are reading the present accurately. You understand that certain behaviors always lead to certain outcomes because you have already walked the entire arc. By naming the pattern early, you spoil the ending of the drama they hoped to perform uninterrupted. Those who rely on manipulation need secrecy and time. They need confusion, emotional fog, and plausible deniability. When you expose the structure of their behavior, you remove the illusion that they are unique, special, or undetectable. This is why they feel exposed. This is why they retreat, lash out, or attempt to discredit your perception. What you carry now is not suspicion, but discernment, not cynicism, but precision. This level of insight is not meant to make you harsh or isolated. It is meant to keep you sovereign. It is a form of protection given to you by God so that you are never again ensnared by the traps of the past. You are no longer drawn into cycles you have already completed. You do not need to prove anything, argue, or warn loudly. Your awareness alone alters the outcome. You're scaring them not because you are aggressive, but because you are untrickable. And to those who depend on deception, nothing is more unsettling than someone who sees clearly and remains unmoved. Point 6, the removal of the spiritual blindfold. The sixth point is the removal of the spiritual blindfold, and this is perhaps one of the most disorienting yet empowering transitions a chosen one ever experiences. We are living in a time of great unveiling, a season where what was hidden is no longer permitted to remain concealed. The very word apocalypse does not mean destruction, as it has been popularly framed. It means a revelation, a lifting of the veil. For you, that veil has been quietly but decisively removed. You are no longer perceiving life only through appearances, roles, and rehearsed explanations. Instead, you see the invisible frameworks that move beneath everyday events. You notice the spiritual dynamics operating behind a corporate meeting where power, fear, and ego silently negotiate control. You recognize generational spirits at work in a family argument, understanding that the conflict did not begin in the room, but decades earlier, passed down through unexamined patterns and inherited wounds. You can sense spiritual poverty in someone who is materially wealthy, discerning the hollowness behind the polished image, the restlessness behind the success. This is not judgment, it is perception. It is a kind of spiritual X-ray vision that peers past surfaces and scans the architecture of the soul. This is precisely why your words land with such unsettling accuracy. When you speak, you do not address symptoms. You speak to roots. You instinctively bypass the rehearsed story and touch the unresolved truth beneath it. People are accustomed to managing appearances, to navigating conversations that remain safely shallow. They want to talk about the weather, the news cycle, the latest distraction, or socially acceptable gossip, because those topics allow them to stay in control. You, however, are drawn to the deeper current. You want to understand the why behind the what, the motive behind the behavior, the wound beneath the reaction. This depth is not something you perform. It is how you now naturally perceive reality. And for many, this is deeply intimidating. Your presence gently but firmly pulls people out of their comfort zones and into the realm of the eternal, where masks dissolve and excuses lose their power. When they ask you, "How did you know?" they are not really asking about your intelligence or intuition. They are confronting the shock of being seen beyond their own awareness. They did not believe anyone else could perceive the undercurrents they themselves have avoided. What truly unsettles them is not you, but the realization that the narrative they thought they controlled no longer holds absolute authority. They sense that something older, deeper, and more truthful has entered the room. You have seen behind the curtain where motivations are formed and patterns are engineered. And once this sight is given, it cannot be revoked. You cannot return to innocence, small talk, or surface living, not because you are superior, but because your consciousness has expanded beyond those confines. This is not a burden meant to isolate you, but a calling that requires discernment, humility, and restraint. You are learning when to speak and when to remain silent, when to reveal and when to observe. The removal of the spiritual blindfold does not make life easier, but it makes it real. And from this point forward, authenticity is no longer optional for you. Point 7, the peace that surpasses understanding. Finally, the seventh point is the peace that surpasses understanding. And this is perhaps the most unsettling thing of all to a world addicted to noise. In a society engineered around urgency, fear, outrage, and constant reaction, your stillness becomes a silent confrontation. While others are frantically managing appearances, chasing validation, defending positions, or explaining themselves into exhaustion, you remain grounded, observant, and unhurried. You are not scrambling to control outcomes, and you are not emotionally negotiating with chaos. You are simply present. This state alone disrupts the emotional economy around you because it reveals how much unnecessary effort everyone else is expending just to feel temporarily secure. Your calm is not indifference, it is mastery. It comes from knowing where you stand and, more importantly, knowing who holds the foundation beneath you. Because you know who you are and you know who God is, you no longer feel compelled to fight for significance, approval, or positioning. There is no desperation in you. There is no frantic reaching. And to a world that equates worth with effort and noise, your lack of striving feels almost unnatural. People begin to sense that you are operating from a different center. They can feel it in your pauses, in the way you respond rather than react, and in the way you remain unshaken while situations escalate around you. This is why your presence creates unease. Others begin to wonder what you see that they do not. They start asking silent questions, not just about outcomes or information, but about perception itself. How did you know when to move? How did you know when to remain still? How did you sense the shift before it happened? What they are really asking is not about facts, but about alignment. Your peace communicates that you are tuned into something deeper than surface-level logic, something beyond emotional impulse. To the ego, this kind of peace feels threatening because it cannot be manipulated, rushed, or intimidated. Power that does not announce itself is always the most dangerous to systems built on control. Your calm exposes the instability of the frameworks others rely on for identity and safety. It silently asks the question they are afraid to face. If peace is possible without constant effort, then what have they been running from all this time? Your peace becomes a living testimony, not through words, but through consistency. It demonstrates that you are anchored in a reality that does not fluctuate with opinions, trends, or crises. While others are tossed back and forth by circumstances, you remain steady, not because life is easier for you, but because your foundation is stronger. And this is what truly unsettles them. Your peace invites reflection. It forces comparison. It awakens a quiet suspicion that there may be a better way to live, one not ruled by fear, striving, or endless reaction. Without preaching, without persuading, without explaining yourself, your stillness becomes an invitation. It whispers that there is another frequency available, another way of being anchored, and another kind of strength that does not need to dominate to be undeniable. And that realization alone is enough to shake the world around you. As we bring this reflection to a close, remember this with absolute clarity. Your so-called scary discernment is not a flaw, a burden, or something to suppress. It is a sacred responsibility, a gift of stewardship entrusted to you for a reason. You were not given this depth of perception to expose, embarrass, or destroy others, but to see clearly, to move wisely, and to navigate life with calm authority and inner order. This knowing within you exists so you can recognize truth beneath appearances, intentions beneath words, and energy beneath behavior, allowing you to walk with grace instead of confusion. When people distance themselves, resist the urge to question yourself. When they seem unsettled or ask how you knew, do not shrink or apologize for your clarity. Let it be a quiet confirmation that the Spirit of truth is active and alert within you, guiding your steps with precision. You are a lighthouse by nature, not loud, not chasing, not demanding attention, simply standing firm and illuminated. And just as a lighthouse offers safety and direction to those seeking the shore, it becomes deeply unsettling to those attempting to hide their ship, among dangerous rocks. The light does not attack, it reveals. Your presence does not accuse, it reflects. This is why some feel exposed around you. It is not because you are harsh, but because truth disrupts illusions they rely on. So keep your light clean, free of bitterness or ego. Keep your spirit quiet, grounded, and unreactive. Continue forward on your anointed path with sober confidence and steady peace, knowing you are seeing exactly what you were meant to see at precisely the right time. You are not frightening others because you are something to fear. You are unsettling because you remind them of truths they abandoned. Remain in that peace, remain in that clarity. You are aligned, you are grounded, you are exactly where you need to be. So